Testing one, two. All right, everyone. Let us get started so we can finish. First off, I hope you're all doing well. Pretty bad nastiness out there, and I'm not wasn't going to go in anyway this morning, and I'm glad they finally confirmed it. So, the weather should be better afternoon, and I would encourage you to go out and enjoy it. So, this last chapter is about the emerging trends in channels. And we're going to talk about three big, large trends, and we're going to break those down in one at a time. First off, also, while we're at it, I'm having this recorded by AI Companion. And if you need anything, please just interrupt me and I will do my best to answer your questions. Sometimes I get busy and I don't look at the chat, so I'll do my best to catch it, okay? Just to make sure, if anyone can't hear me, please let me know. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that everyone can. So let me go ahead and start by bringing up this last chapter on emerging channel structures and strategies. So, this chapter really boils down to just really three things. And those three things are talking about where marketing channels are going. And this chapter has three trends. It is the shift to service based economies, the globalization of markets, even though we say sometimes it's tough, and the growth of the e commerce channel. And we're going to include the multi channel and the omni channel as well in this discussion. So, we talked about the increasing sales of music and books. And we've also talked about the service supplied is less than the service demanded. And we have been able to close that gap a lot, quite simply, with the birth of online technology. So we're looking at a very uncertain market right now. And what we're finding is the market tends to adjust by trying to adjust where consumers can seek the greatest value and provide the greatest benefit to the companies. So let's start by talking to channel strategies for services. So remember when we talked about, even at the beginning of the class, we talked about if two products are exactly the same, how are consumers going to make their choices? Well, quite obviously, we'll make the choices on price. Ultimately, if there is a commoditization of two particular items, then our first way that we're going to react is we're going to find the one that's quite simply the cheapest. The shift to services has been very fast, and it is both an offense and defensive kind of motivation, because ultimately what it's there for is to provide a greater separation. Remember, we don't sell in marketing on the similarities, we sell on the differences. So one of the things Emerson did was Emerson is the largest supplier of reefers in the world, not those kind of reefers, okay? Large refrigerations. Okay. So one of the things that Emerson had a difficulty with, that I remember talking about this with IBM as well, is the difficulty of selling their products and having inconsistent sales figures during the year. What Emerson wanted to do to increase their uniqueness is basically they bought back all of their equipment, then released it, applied a warranty contract, which included the maintenance and the calibration of those particular refrigeration units. What it did ultimately is take, in essence, a product or a good that they sold and really fine tuned it into a service. And as it was said before, when you have service contracts already there is a desire by the people who have them to use them. I mean, to use the money. So ultimately, in the long run, it's all good. All the advantages come to it. And so what I mean by that is that consumers are encouraged to make sure that their equipment is sound. They're encouraged by the maintenance to be able to check often. And part of the agreements is those service people to be able to come in, make sure that everything is working before a problem occurs. The second thing with that also is it takes these up and down cycles when it comes to selling and gives you this nice flat profit across the entire year. And that's the other advantage that Emerson got. And so the services increased. It also increased the level of differentiation. And in essence, what it did was Emerson became the owner of the market. And so this is a process also considered known as disintermediation. Yes, this is a test question. So this goes all the way back to chapter 1, where we talked about manufacturers cutting channel partners out and selling directly to end customers. You see this a lot in e-commerce, and of course, it's accelerated over the years. Disintermediation means quite simply no general or specialized intermediaries. Remember also, though, is that when you remove the intermediaries, you don't remove the functions that they perform. And so what you're saying is that you as a manufacturer have the ability of covering those particular items and being able to continue on and increase value to the consumer. Now, what this does is it shifts services down the distribution chain, basically to bring multiple benefits as well. When you add services, you also erect barriers to outside influences and especially offshore suppliers as well. And this is the effective thing that Emerson has done, is basically as it has created this defensive barrier so that individuals who wish to come in with another product have extreme difficulty breaking in. Quite simply, the buy-in is simply too high. And so, if we're going to talk about services, let's just mention that even at McDonald's, you're basically buying a service. Hopefully, you're buying convenience, not all the time. But what a couple of the things that you're trying to do is you're trying to deliver food fast. It's as simple as that. And of course, the fast part is one of those things we're still in negotiation over. So, if we're going to talk about what makes a service special and how it brings value to the consumer, we're going to have to talk about the characteristics of a service and how do we care and feed those so that we achieve a maximum benefit. So let's look at the characteristics of a service one at a time. The first is that it's intangible. Performance and use means that you're actually creating and consuming the product at the initiation of or at the point of purchase. The services can't be touched. They can't be seen in the same ways. You cannot take a service and inventory it. Now it says patented, but I'm going to bend this a little bit because there are haircuts, believe it or not, that have patents. Roy Sebring was known as the Sebring cut among men. And it was a specialized way of cutting hair, a feathered look back in the 60s and 70s. And he patented that. Having said that, okay, if you were to put it in a question, in an answer, I promise you I would not count it out. All right. But services can't be inventoried, patented, or physically displayed. That has a significant amount of marketing channels because it demands that consumers trust a lot more than if they have a finished good that they can look at. And the other part of that is that buyers have a stronger relationships when it comes to selling services because there's the need to be able to be connected with the products that they're buying. Along with their being intangible, they have more performance heterogeneity, which means basically that instead of being products that are manufactured in a highly controlled factory, every service is created and consumed at the moment of its purchase. Ultimately, it means that there is a much greater dependence on the employee who delivers the service. It makes it harder to standardize performance, but it also highlights competence and strength. Um, it is a standalone performance generally, and those standalone performances tend to be remembered not necessarily by the product itself, but by the people who create them. And so, um, as I've said, where each individual part that you buy goes through a series of steps to ensure that every part is like each other. In services, the uniqueness and the differences are more valued than the conformity. Okay, so we have heterogeneity, we have intangibility, and we also have the degree of co-production. So I wrote a paper with Dr. Almanson on the dyad between individuals who are wishing to get in shape and their trainers. And if you think about it, if I were to go to a trainer and I were to say, make me fit, the first thing I would have to do is try to understand, well, what does that mean? In 100 years, fitness has meant corpulence, being huge. It has meant being slim. It has meant being muscular. It has meant being toned. And so when you go to a service and you are asked for that particular service, it requires both the end user and the manufacturer to come up ultimately with a product that is unique and specialized to themselves. Co-production means that the end user and the manufacturer communicate together to create this ultimate product. And we know this as one of the major kinds of linchpins in marketing thought and marketing theory is the whole concept of co-production. And so, the key to, success in co-production is also interaction and relationships. And so we're not going to worry about this particular. I want to come to here and say, if this is valued, in other words, if service was so important, then how do you go about turning your corporations into service organizations? Or how do you transit into service? Well, there's three ways to do it. There's either in-house development, collaboration, or acquisition. And so in-house development is a slow and expensive way. It pits a supplier directly against their channel partners while they're going through the transition itself. It can actually put you in a conflict and make it very difficult for you to be able to move downward. This happened with IBM. It's happened with AT&T. But the advantages of in-house development is that it's consistent with the brand message and the goals of your particular corporation. Collaboration is basically where you select a partner on the basis of their particular capabilities. And what you do is you come up with a joint venture, either a unique organization, or you both share the results of that, particular a goal. So an example of this, a collaboration I've talked about before, is when GM and Toyota in the 80s created a factory to make the Chevy Nova and the Toyota Corona in the United States. In essence, they were both the same product. GM suffered a little loss of control of that, which was probably to their benefit because the factory ran in the Toyota way. They created a very good Chevy Nova. Unfortunately, the Corona, which was bolt for bolt the same as the Chevy Nova. Now, said this, the Corona outsold the Chevy Nova by a factor of 4-1. And then the last is acquisition. And as I've talked about acquisition before, yes, on the test, you will see they are the fastest and greatest chance of success when you're hoping to either acquire capabilities or also if you're trying to spread out into other markets. And so these are the three ways in which we transition to service. So We talked about strategies for service. Now we're going to talk about globalization and why there is an inevitable push. What are the drivers of globalization? Well, in fact, there are three. All right. The first is the need to find new revenue. Um, in the industrial countries, the first world countries, we are facing an aging population with decreasing birth rates. In many countries, basically, the birth rates are not supportive of replacing even the populations of these times. And quite simply, is you're seeing a reduction in the population in many of the industrialized countries, and there's just quite simply fewer people to buy the products. So the one way is to go to seek out and find new growth. And along with that, there's only one direction to go, and that's to international markets. The advances in infrastructure, of course, and the greater ability to be able to communicate globally, those have helped to expand it. And the internet has accelerated international expansion like nothing else has. All right. And then finally, the focus on globalization, especially is in demographic and competitive advantages, especially in newly industrialized nations. And so you find, you are not close to the opening of Eastern Europe, but for those who remember it, and Eastern Europeans, you have a series of countries east of Germany, including Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. All of those countries were once part of the European or the Soviet bloc. And those countries, even though they have traditions that have lasted, far longer than the United States, they haven't been democratic republics for only about 30 to 35 years. And so development in those nations has been slow, but it is increasing. But they are open markets that are available for us to be able to hopefully sell to. And so revenue growth, the opening of those international markets, and now a focus on globalization. Those are the right reasons that you see this push going on now. So we had this shakeout period where we started to grow. There was a high level of conflict, quite simply because the partners didn't know each other. There was a increasing sensitivity, especially in the Western European countries, of the concerns of, let's just say, the movement of corporations outside of their own countries, in essence, taking their revenues. And so that caused a lot of consternation. How do you find your way in? That's very, very difficult. And the single question for this is the way that you find a way into global markets is the very same one that you use when you're thinking about moving to services, and that's acquisition. The fastest way to gain a meaningful level of sales in a market is to basically acquire it. You acquire not only the understanding of the cultures that you're trying to sell to, you also acquire the channel systems that as they exist. It is the greatest barriers tends to be local knowledge and the execution capability, understanding the area that you're under and getting your feet under the ground. Now, this is also an excellent location if we remember from chapter 8 that the franchising model works well. The business format, franchising can be put in there, but use local managers who own and operate the channel. As a matter of fact, you don't have to know this for the test, but the franchising strategy is they'll put one franchise in a nation. They'll allow it to grow, and that individual becomes the international representative for that particular company or for that particular corporation, and then that individual company, as a multi-format channel, they can go out and recruit franchises under them as well. And so the franchising model works very well. Just remember, acquisition is the way in which you can find your way into local markets with a minimum of fuss and feathers. And so finally, we're going to talk about e-commerce. So, what are the drivers of e-commerce? Well, it really comes down to, once again, um, trying to find the best way to be able to provide services to their consumers. And once again, because we have widely expanding markets, being able to service them all quite simply as fast as we can. It does cause conflict with existing channels, and it makes it very difficult sometimes. But really, many times it's the only way for growth to happen. And so, the other advantages that e-commerce brings is it allows smaller third parties to be able to penetrate nations that they wouldn't necessarily be able to get into. And so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Also, one of the reasons for being able to, or the reasons why you use e-commerce well, is the ability to be able to start with a proven business model with relatively inexpensive ways in which you can create commerce. I find it interesting when I look at all of these influencers that are on the YouTube now, and they're selling all type of things from T-shirts to everything else. And a lot of this, quite simply, you couldn't even possibly think about doing this um, with the enormous investment it would usually take. However, with a YouTube channel and a little bit of savvy and quite a bit of thinking, you can go a long way. Online lowers the barriers for being able to move into a market. It does cause conflict with existing channels, which is typical when you start to increase the intensity of every channel coverage. It is just its basic nature, and usually the manufacturers have to find some way to deal with this. We will not have to know all of these things. What I want to do is I want to step into hierarchical multi-channel relationships. We are finding an increase of both vertical channels and horizontal as well. I think what you're saying ultimately is that dual distribution is the name of the game. Um, Not only that, but supply chains themselves can have simultaneous vertical and horizontal relationships as well. And what we find is that the multi-channel has greatly expanded the number of outlets that you can be able to find particular goods. So, what is the multi-channel? The multi-channel is when the consumers are given more than one outlet for their consumer purchases from a single company, excuse me. Um, an example of a multi-channel would be you going to Walmart. Um, Walmart being able to basically deliver those goods when you order from there, or you carry them out, or you go online and you order them and they come to your home. That is an example of the multi-channel. The multi-channel basically is more than one outlet in which your goods are transited through and ultimately delivered to you. So this particular quote gives you an idea how old this stuff is. It's 2002, and they're talking about the multi-channel and its abilities. It said the strategies at first mainly involved the decision on whether new channels should be added to the existing channel mix. And what we found is that the internet created a whole new set of channels or ways for us to deliver goods. So, talked about this before. 2013, Walmart suddenly realized they have a big hole in the dike, and that particular thing happens to be the amount of money that Amazon is, or they're finding they're losing to Amazon when it comes to retail sales. So 2013 comes along. You see that lower left-hand one that says Jet.com. 2013, Walmart acquires Jet.com. They take the CEO of Jet, turn him into the CIO of Walmart, and let him do his magic. Jet.com, by the way, was a dynamic search engine that would look over the internet to find the best price for a given good. So, after being put in, he they buy Voodoo, they buy Moose Jaw, which is a outdoor recreation. They buy the Amazon equivalent or excuse me, the Indian equivalent of Amazon, which is Flipkart, and then finally buy shoebuy.com and then shoes.com. Shoes.com, I think, annually sells something to the effect of 30 to 35 million pair. And that is actually a Walmart corporation. And if you're surprised that these are things are owned by Walmart, no, well, that's one of the things is that's part of what the multi-channel is. They tend to live in certain siloed areas. They tend to be walled off from each other. But remember also, as I said, more channels should be for different different market segments. And that's what this has. Or let's just say in the modern day, Walmart has sold Voodoo. I think they've sold Moose Jaw. They've bought a couple of three more. They've reinvested in the Walmart website. And so this is the multi-channel. You would never know you're buying from Walmart, and yet you're buying shoes from Walmart. By the very same token, any of the others are, they don't say their name, but that's also for a purpose because they're going for a different market segment. I've said this before. Progressive, the website Progressive, is a subsidiary of Allstate. Now, why doesn't Allstate put that under their own website? And the reason is it is a multi-channel delivering a different service to a different clientele. Now, along with this time, about 2009, I was teaching at Louisiana Tech, and this was my first year as a teacher there. And I was noticing I had a razor at the time, my phone, and I saw one of the students in my sales management class have a cell phone, and I forgot really what the reason why I asked it, but I asked how many in here have a smartphone now, and everyone in 2009 raised their hand, and I said to myself, I have missed something. Something has happened, and what has happened was. Um, we were delivered marketing channels, the greatest single device to expand to channels than we ever had. Um, the Omni channel came along and totally revolutionized the way that we do channels and the way that we do business now by allowing the consumers to ultimately control all of the service outputs practically at their own fingertips. Now, just think about it. You go to DoorDash and you go to DoorDash to order from McDonald's. And it's the delivery company that brings them to you and does the ordering for you. And for that, they charge a fee. Now, it almost seems like it's not efficient, but just remember what I said. The sign of more people in the channel environment is a sign of greater progress and greater efficiency, not less. Because when one particular group does all of that one particular function, they have the advantages of economies of scale and they can do it better than anyone else. Well, they talked about the omni-channel in 2011, and here it is today. So we're moving from this multi-channel to an omni-channel retailing model where the consumer has such great control. And in this article in 2013, I'm not going to butcher these poor people's name, but they said in the past, brick and mortar retail stores were unique in allowing consumers to touch and even feel merchandise and provide instant gratification. Internet retailers, meanwhile, tried to woo shoppers with a wide product selection. This is known as the endless aisle. In other words, when you put in something in your search engine, you can be searching forever. All right. low prices, and content such as product reviews and ratings. As the retailing industry evolves towards a seamless omni-channel retailing experience, the distinctions between the physical and the online will vanish, turning the world into a showroom without walls. We actually have had different permutations of those kind of things because, quite simply, when there's too many choices, it becomes not difficult or impossible, but it doesn't lend itself to the overall experience. And so, this is what the omni-channel is. And if we were to look at the models between the two, we would find that what happens is that in a multi-channel environment, there's a tendency towards silos where there is some connection together, but basically they lack the one thing that the omni-channel has, and it's the connection to the consumer. The consumer is the one who does their online work. The consumer is the one who shops in the brick and mortar stores, who says by word of mouth whether they enjoy this or not. In essence, the focus of the omni-channel is on the consumer, and the consumer is the one who drives, initiates the task, performs many of the service outputs, and ultimately receives the greatest benefits. And so, coming down to that test question that everybody wants to hear, if I ask what is the difference between the omni-channel and the multi-channel, the answer is that the multi-channel is customer centric. And I want you to think of this: the omni-channel is customer driven. The customer drives it from the beginning, from the selection, ordering, and the delivery. The omni-channel basically, or excuse me, the consumer rules over everything. And realize that multi-channel retailing is probably ubiquitous now. It's basically omni-channel retailing, and that's where we are. So my end would just quite say, and it's the biggest factor that's disrupting structures and strategy right now, is e-commerce. It allows suppliers to sell directly to customers without the intermediaries, and this is the driver of disintermediation. It removes the barriers to market entry. It also causes markets to fragment into smaller and smaller sections, which means we as retailers have to be able to understand which of those targets we find attractive and which ones we should be selling to. And just remember that commerce or e-commerce will continue to sell and achieve new goals and benefits as the years go on. And so that's the takeaway from chapter 9. Those are the three most significant trends. Remember, I want you to understand what the definitions for services are. Understand that the main driver of globalizations, those three characteristics. Remember the benefits for acquisition when it comes to services and in globalization. Remember the definitions of the multi-channel and the omni-channel, and what is the differences between the two. Are there any questions? The test is going to be pretty much the same, 30 questions, multiple guesses, probably about eight essay questions. You'll choose 4, probably 6 or 8 bonus questions. 4 bonus questions worth 8 extra points. And I will have up the videos before this afternoon. I'll have them up and running. Before you go, I want to mention that this is Veterans Day. My dad was a veteran of World War II. He passed away in 2021. And my dad was a merchant marine. He was 15 years old when, in 1942, he was boarded a ship and literally went around the world. By the time he got back, when he was 16, almost a half of their crew had been killed. Your veterans, the people who, in essence, are your descendants, or you're the descendants of them, went through some enormous tasks to be able to get where they are. If you do have veterans in your family, or if you know one, don't forget to tell them, thank them for their services, and spend a moment to appreciate these people. World War II veterans, there were 16 million who went to war, and we're now down to about 20,000. And when they all pass away, they will be all gone. And so, if you have the chance today, and if you have someone in your family, I would urge you to say thank you in whatever way that you find meaningful. Okay. All right, folks. I hope you all have a good afternoon. Weather's supposed to be better in the afternoon, so go out and enjoy and have a great day. Okay. Thank you, Will. Thank you, everyone. Go have a good time.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye. Thank you. Bye bye.